Welcome to episode 66 of the Strength Running Podcast with a special co-host, British Olympic Trials qualifier and 11-time All-American, Tina Muir. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Strength Running Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Fitzgerald, and I'm excited that I'll be having a co-host today. You see, I've been collecting all types of running questions over the last few weeks, and I decided to have my friend Tina Muir on to help me answer them all. You probably recognize Tina. She was a guest on the show in episode 31, so if you want to hear more from her, you can go back and listen to that episode. We had a really great conversation about her decision to stop training. She was recovering from amenorrhea and wanted to start a family. Well, now Tina has a daughter and she's getting back into her training, and I feel like she got just what she wanted, and I just couldn't be happier for her. All right, so before we start today, please join me in thanking our new sponsor for this episode, Route Pepper. They're a new route planning app that allows you to create a running route and then get directions for that route directly from your earphones. You can go to routepepper.com to download the free app and stop getting lost out there when you're running. Okay, on to today's episode. Tina and I are answering almost a dozen questions about everything from walk breaks, tapering, compression socks, 5K training, Ragnar Relay training, estimating a runner's potential, and a lot more. I think you're going to like this really freewheeling discussion, and hopefully you'll learn a lot, even if you didn't have one of these specific questions yourself. I think doing Q&A is one of the most effective ways of giving back to the running community, of spreading more knowledge about our wonderful sport, and helping as many runners as possible with their training. So without further ado, please welcome my co-host for this episode, Ms. Tina Muir. All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm here with Tina Muir, and we are going to do a bunch of running Q&A today. I have pulled all kinds of questions from Twitter and Facebook and email and other sources online, and so you are going to find something that really is going to speak to you today. So hopefully we cover a question that really helps you with your running. So Tina, thanks for being here.
Thank you for joining me. I'm excited for this. I'm a little bit nervous, though, I have to admit. What if it's something I don't know?
I know. Well, I should tell our audience right now, I haven't shared any of the questions with you. So this is going to be really interesting. We'll get our kind of unfiltered advice. And, these are questions that span all kinds of different topics, from injuries to race strategy to just general training. We're really going to cover a lot. So without further ado, let's start. Our first question comes from Rodrigo, and Rodrigo wants to know, since I only have time to run 3 times a week, should all my workouts be hard workouts? And is it possible to have serious running goals when you only run 3 times a week? This is an interesting one. So let me start with the second part of this question. Is it possible to have serious running goals when you only run 3 times a week? I'm of the mind that the more you run, the better you're going to be. So I think, if you do have serious running goals and you really want to commit yourself to them, you are going to have to run more than 3 days a week. With that said, I'm also a realist. If you literally cannot run more than 3 times a week because you travel a lot for your job, it's very demanding, maybe you have a large family, you otherwise have all of these commitments, then there's not much you can do about that. And you can still reach a lot of your goals with only running 3 times a week. I think you just have to prioritize the most important work and just make sure that, you're doing as much as you can on those days that you're not running to further your running goals. So in other words, let's just not sit down for 12 hours a day and eat 8,000 calories, and that's obviously not going to be helping your running at all. So I think there's certain ways to do things that are going to help you reach your goals. I think at the end of the day, for this particular runner, I'd say let's try to push it to 4 to 5 days of running. But I still think it's possible.
Yeah, there's a big jump between three to even 4, or especially 3 to 5 days a week. You're going to see vast improvements there, even if the 4th and 5th days are significantly shorter, or just little bits you can cram in, or even if they're maybe, I don't know, biking to work or biking somewhere, maybe you have to get a few little groceries, you can bike to the store and get yourself something. But I think you're right in that way. And I would ask, when you say serious running goals, Rodriguez, what does that mean? For me, I've always been someone who is very against people putting time restrictions on goals, saying I have to do it on this day, I have to do it then. So serious running goals can mean different things to different people, within yourself. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a running goal, but it just may take you a little bit longer to get there because your body's going to need more time, more years to kind of put those miles to accumulate to actually allow you to get somewhere. Now, obviously, if it's going to be something like a marathon or an ultra marathon, it's going to be quite difficult to get to where you want to go, or probably a level that you would consider a big goal. But at the same time, maybe your big goal is to, make it across the finish line, in which case, yes, it probably could be done. So I'm sorry, I kind of jumped over your...
No, I appreciate you doing so, because I was I just love your perspective on things, Tina, and I like that you kind of wanted more information on what is a serious running goal. I mean, if I showed up to cross country practice my freshman year in college and I said I can only run 3 times a week, I wouldn't be allowed to be on the team. If my serious running goal is qualifying for Boston or running my first marathon, that's going to be really hard with just 3 days a week of running. So the word serious is very subjective. And, for this runner, maybe he can achieve all of his serious running goals with just 3 times a week. But I think it's just going to be challenging, I think is what we're both getting at. Let's talk about the first part of his question, which is, should all of those runs, if there's only 3 per week, should be hard workouts? I might say, let's split it up. Let's do one really specific workout for the race that you're training for. Let's do a long run. And then that third run, I'm probably, I kind of want to do like a medium length run or an easy workout for that second day of the week. I'm very hesitant about having runners do high quality running for all of their running. And I do consider a long run a high quality run.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, again, a lot of it for me is going to come down to when you say 3 times a week, are you talking about you work all week and you can't do it during the week, so you have 2 runs on the weekend and then maybe one other day, in which case I think that definitely applies what you just said right there, that third run should be an easy run, and maybe you can get away with a workout and then a long run, and then the other one being a somewhat harder run or medium run. But if they're spread out, if it's, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, then maybe you can get away with doing a little bit more of an up-tempo day on that third day. But I definitely agree with you there that one of the days should be specific, one of the days should be longer, and one of the days should be, either a medium run, like you said, or something like a run with a fartlek in it, or something that has no structure to it really, other than, like 10 by 1 minute, just something to kind of keep some pep in your step, or even just an easy run with some strides afterwards.
I love it. All right, let's move on to our next question. This is about runners who incorporate a walk break into their running. How can these folks advance to all running without hurting themselves? I have some certain thoughts on this. Tina, I'd love for you to start on this one.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is that I feel like people who do take walk breaks in their running feel like they're not real runners. You're not members of the club. You're, kind of out there and you're just kind of an outsider basically. But if you think about it, runners of every level do have maybe not walk breaks, although sometimes it is, but they will do intervals, which is essentially what you're doing. So even though you might feel like you're not doing enough, or you're not like cool enough because you're not doing a continuous run, every runner of every level is going to do intervals at some point. And when I do my hard intervals, or even when I used to, when I was at my, very peak, I would still do intervals and I would walk in parts of those. So firstly, don't shoot yourself down like you have to get to continuous. If you enjoy doing the short bursts with walk breaks, don't feel like you have to be pressured into continuous runs. But I do get that, that's something that it's empowering and it feels good to know that it's continuous. So I would just kind of say to gradually keep increasing the amount of time you spend running and decreasing the amount of walk breaks. So let's say right now you're doing 1 minute of running and 2 minutes of walking, or 3 minutes of running and 2 minutes of walking. You want to cut down so it's maybe 90 seconds of walking. And then you want to cut it down so that eventually it's only 30 seconds of walking, kind of the Jeff Galloway method of just being a short little break. And eventually you'll kind of get to the point where, when it's 30 seconds, it shouldn't be that much harder to remove that last 30 seconds, especially if you've got up to the point where it's maybe run 10 minutes and walk 30 seconds or walk a minute. You're not too far away. So you can either pick which end you want to go for, either increasing the run and keeping the rest or the walk kind of the same, or you can kind of just keep decreasing the amount of time that you're spending walking until it's 0, and then gradually building up the amount of time continuous running from there. But what would you say there? Was I completely confusing you, Jason?
No, I think that's great advice. I think, basically what you're saying is, let's reduce walking the same way that we try to get faster. We gradually over time try to increase our capacity for more work. And that's essentially what we're doing. My thoughts on walk breaks and running is that, I think they are a wonderful tool to help runners get used to running right at the beginning of their running journey. So beginners, particularly runners who might be starting in middle age, or who are kind of going from, couch to run, who don't have a long history of athletics participation, then those walk breaks might be really necessary to, keep their heart rate down and make sure that, an easy run is in fact easy. But, just like we learn to ride a bike with training wheels, I think at a certain point we do have to take them off and, really try to run most of our mileage. Because I think if you've been running for years and you stop every 10 minutes to do a 30-second walk break, I don't think you need to walk, because at that point, after a couple minutes, your heart rate, as long as your pace is consistent, isn't going to continue to increase, until you reach your max. If the effort is consistent, your heart rate is going to level off. And, the real goal is get to a fitness level where the point at which your heart rate levels off during an easy effort is comfortable. And you can maintain that for, an hour or hour and a half or whatever your run might be, or a lot shorter than that.
Do you think any part of that is mental, though? Kind of the idea of saying, oh, I can't believe I'm going to run for half an hour. Like, that's way too long. Like, it makes me think of when I coached at LaSalle University, we would have the middle distance, the 800-meter runners do what we called a lane 8 tempo, where they would run in lane 8, they would run all but 10 meters, I think it was, of a lap, and they would walk that 10 meters and then do it again. And they would do it for the equivalent of 3 to 4 miles. But for them, that little tiny walk break was enough to make them feel like they were doing intervals, which, middle distance sprinters kind of like. But it tricked them mentally, because really that 10 seconds or 10 steps they got was nothing. So do you think any part of it is mental?
I think a huge part of it is mental. Absolutely. I think, the runner who is kind of setting themselves up to crave and need those walk breaks, I think there's, almost like a mental addiction to them. It's like they think that they're getting all this recovery out of a short walk break. But, like this is an actual example. Someone, within the last week or two asked me about walk breaks, and they were stopping once every 10 minutes for a 30-second walk break. For that kind of a runner, yes, I think walk breaks are this kind of mental crutch that they're using to get through a run. I think at that point, you don't need to stop and walk at all. But if you feel like you need to stop and walk every minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, then at that point it might be a little bit more physical. But yeah, I think if we can get runners to the point where they are mentally strong enough to get through a 30-minute run, then they're not only going to be better runners, but they're going to have more confidence in their abilities, and I think they're going to get more enjoyment out of the sport, just because they're, they have this idea that they're doing more, and I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to another one. This question starts off with, I've always struggled with tapering before a marathon. I understand the logic that you're supposed to rest more before a big race and you're not going to gain any further fitness benefits from training hard, but I always feel like I'm not doing enough and I'm losing fitness during that taper period. Do you have any advice for me?
Okay. firstly, I totally get it. We all do. It's very easy to fall in that mindset to essentially trust that you have done enough, that, as they say, the hay is in the barn, and, to push out that voice saying that you are losing fitness. And especially, I don't know about you, Jason, and I don't know about the listeners, but that workout the week before, or especially the week of, you often feel the last thing you do that's hard, you feel terrible. You feel like, how am I possibly going to run this pace? How am I going to handle this? I can't even do this workout, which is supposed to be quote unquote easy, and I'm struggling. And it's very easy to let it run away with you in your mind. And so that doesn't help the situation. It doesn't help the situation that we often feel dead, heavy legged and tired all week during taper. So I'm sure in the past, to the listener's question, you have felt tired, which is probably, conditioned that response to you to make you think, well, that's probably why I'm, make you think that, yes, I am losing fitness because I feel so bad right now. But remember that your body is storing up. It is a bit confused. It's wondering what's going on. You were, pushing it so hard, and now you're backing away. But at the same time, it needs that rest kind of to get stronger. There's so many situations where we push through, which is great. But we all need a rest to allow ourselves to reach that level where we can dig down and just really give it your all. So you have to kind of remind yourself, when do you want to feel the best? It's the whole thing of, would you rather be a tiny bit less fit but end up healthy and ready to go on race day? Or would you rather kind of keep pummeling through but then end up running out of steam halfway through your race because you've essentially left it out in your training? So, I get that it's scary, and I probably didn't really even answer the question there, probably just more giving mental reassurance that it's okay to feel crappy during taper, and it's okay not to feel good, but it really is going to make a difference. And I'm sure, Jason, you have more of the science behind it than I do. I kind of just give the pep talk here.
Well, I'm not sure if we need much of the science. I mean, there's obviously, we can talk about the stress adaptation cycle. We can talk about how, you've just undergone weeks and months of high stress training. And, while you're building in recovery and opportunities to adapt to that training throughout the training cycle, the taper is really like that recovery effort, taken up to a whole new level. I was going to say taking that recovery, like on steroids, but maybe we'll stay away from the steroid analogies when we're talking about running. But yeah, so I think that, the science is important to recognize and understand. I like to tell my athletes that when you line up on race day, that you have to trust your training. You've done the work. You have to trust that training has given you the adaptations to reach your goals. I think the flip side to that coin is that you also have to trust your recovery. If you do a hard 20-mile run, you know that if you get a couple nights of great sleep, you spend some time on the foam roller, you eat a great diet, lower stress in your life, stay hydrated, you know that in a couple days you're going to feel much, much better. The same thing is going to happen after a taper. I think runners start to get, I don't want to say addicted, but they start to feel like, I'm not fit or I'm not building fitness if I don't feel sore or tired or something like that all the time. Now, that's a great feeling when you're, in the middle of your marathon cycle and you're putting in high mileage and hard workouts and long runs and everything that encapsulates your training. That's what you want. You want your body to be in kind of like a perpetually stressed state, so that, you can get those adaptations. But when you take a 2-week taper or maybe a 3-week taper, you're not going to be in that state. You're going to be running a lot less. Your intensity will probably be maintained, but with a reduction of your volume of 20, 30, 40%, you're going to feel like you're on vacation. You're going to feel like you're not even training at all. And that is what you want, even though it feels weird. It doesn't feel normal. You don't feel the same heaviness in your legs, which kind of has been signaling to you that you're in shape. You're still in shape. It takes way longer than a week or two for you to lose all your fitness. In fact, it takes about 2 weeks for your aerobic fitness to start to erode. But that's 2 weeks off completely. You're still doing workouts, you're still running and maintaining that fitness that you've so patiently built over those last couple months. So from my perspective, it's just trust the recovery, trust that, all athletes are tapering before their race. It is a tried and true method. And it's just something where I think a lot of runners just simply have to get out of their own way and allow that process to happen.
Absolutely. Great advice.
Okay, let's move on to another question. This one's on compression socks. I get questions about compression socks more often than I thought I probably would. And I think the question is, are they going to help my running? And let me start with this one. I'll talk about, I think, the two benefits of compression socks, or really the two claims that compression sock companies will make to runners. And that's number one, it's going to improve your recovery. And potentially number two, that it's going to improve your performance. Now, my understanding of the science, the studies that kind of look at these questions is that if you wear compression socks during a race, you're not going to run any faster. I think some of the claims that compression sock companies make is, something along the lines of it's going to reduce some of that small muscle vibrations, and that's going to reduce muscle damage. And, in a long race, even maybe 10K on the track, something where you're really hammering for a long time, then that can give you some added advantage. I'm not sure I buy that. I'm not sure if the research says that. I haven't really heard any anecdotal evidence. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go all in on that statement, but the recovery benefits I think are pretty clear. Compression socks do improve blood flow to the legs, and we know that extra blood flow is really helpful for that recovery process. It clears waste products. It brings new nutrients to the area from freshly oxygenated blood. So I think there's a lot to be said about strategically using compression socks after a hard workout or a long run or race to just boost that recovery process. I don't really wear them personally. I think I did maybe, 5+ years ago, I think around 2010, 2012, when they were a little bit more popular. But, I haven't really found too much use for them in my own training. What about you, Tina?
Well, firstly, you're talking to the right person about this, not because I'm some compression socks nerd who has just, dove into all the research. I definitely did look into the research and you've obviously answered the question there. Does it help you running? Yes, but in a roundabout way. It doesn't help you run faster, but it helps you recover faster, which helps you run faster. But for me, that was where it originally came from, that I read about that and I was interested in that. And then I think as someone who used to have shin issues for years, like over and over again, the compression socks, I will say, did seem to kind of, I don't know if it was psychological, but it seemed to like hold my calf together a bit more, like so that it kind of like those Zenza calf sleeves. I feel like they had the ridges in the right area that pushed the muscle together so that it didn't bother me as much. So I will say that if someone has lots of calf issues, it might be worth a try. Now, as you mentioned, the claims, whether you can actually say, they are working in a particular way, especially with there being so many brands and so many styles. But for me, I definitely would say those Zenza calf sleeves did help me. Now, I mentioned I was the right person to ask. I actually have raced with compression socks for every race since probably 2010, because I just started off as that thing of, when you said they were fashionable or whatever, it's particularly fashionable. I started off with the trend, I want to wear these, and I just kept wearing them. And then they became a psychological thing. Part of my pre-race routine, I would put on my compression socks, and it was just part of my racing style. So for me, even though the benefits, who knows how good they really are, for me, they help me get in the zone, help me feel like I'm putting something on that is going to help. So if someone else is in the same boat and it can help you feel like essentially you're putting your hero outfit on, that's part of your change of clothes to be a superhero, then, go for it. That's kind of all I would add, really.
Yeah, and that's the psychological side of things, which we should not discount whatsoever. I think, it's like ice baths. Ice baths have really never been proven to improve recovery, but many runners swear by them. And if the placebo effect is working there, then, I'm of the mind that if you think it's working, then it's working. Let's just keep doing it.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about training specifics. I got a question recently about training for the 5K, and the question was, if you're training for a 5K and you have to miss a few runs during a given week, what are the, quote, non-negotiable or most important runs of the week that you should absolutely try to get in? Now, let's just remember this is someone training for the 5K. What do you think, Tina?
I still think a longer run is important. I don't think you can discount it and just squeeze in all the hard stuff, because even if a longer run for a 5K is, maybe, 8-10 miles, maybe even less, I still think that's very important. And my husband, who is the brains behind my operation, everything I've learned from him. He has always really valued the long run for his cross country and track teams. And that's always what I believe one of the keys to the athletes racing so well and myself racing well when I was doing 5Ks was, even when I was doing 5Ks, I was racing 10, 12, 14 miles, which running 10, 12, 14 miles consistently. Now, I do think that that is a major part, but obviously the speed work is also incredibly important. So I would say keeping a longer run in and keeping at least one of your workouts in there, something that is specific. One of my favorite ones to do, I used to do 16 to 20 400s on a track at what we called rhythm pace, which is kind of essentially your 10K pace, 400s with about a minute recovery. That was one of the key workouts I would do. And I feel like that kind of style of workout where you're running maybe slightly slower than your race pace, but getting down to about race pace, but doing more of it are the key kind of areas that I would focus on there. What about you?
Yeah, I think when it comes to shorter distances, like the 5K, I think for me, it's definitely the long run and the faster quality session of the week. Those are definitely what I would consider the two non-negotiable, most important runs of the week. We could probably debate whether or not the long run is more important or the faster workout. If this was like an entire month, maybe you could only run once a week. Maybe let's alternate. A long run and a workout. But those are the two in my book that the runner is going to get more out of those workouts, and they're going to spur the most adaptations. So those are the runs that we should try to prioritize. But, I think going back to the first question we answered, you can maintain your fitness, I think, for a little while, just running, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, but not for a very long time. You can only do that for maybe 2 weeks or so until, your fitness really starts to erode. So I wouldn't do it for a very long time. But, if you're on vacation or it's a crazy busy week for you, you got a million things going on, I would say maybe choose the long run or the faster workout. Try to get in what you can elsewhere, but those should be your top 2 most prioritized runs of the week.
And I just want to add one thing. If it is a work situation, now is the vacation time, so it may well just be vacation. But if it is a work thing and you have lots of crazy stuff and you never know, how study breaks actually help you be more productive. And we think that, studying all night is going to help us be better. But actually, if you kind of stop, let your body process and kind of, start again in the morning or take a break, you're going to get more out of it. The same thing with if you've got a crazy week at work, maybe having a short run, even if it's something small, might give you that mental break and allow you to process what's going on at work so that you can actually be more productive and get more done. So I would, even if you can just squeeze in 20 minutes, 10 minutes, it might actually help you to deal with that if this is a work situation that you're talking about.
Yeah, and even just a 10-minute run is going to be great for your mental health. It's just going to be helpful for you just to loosen up and feel a little better. I would say lose 10 minutes of sleep to get in a 10-minute run, because that is, if the alternative is no run at all, you're going to feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about training for a Ragnar Relay. I have never done one of these. I don't know if you have.
Nope.
How do you think about training someone for a Ragnar Relay?
So is the Ragnar Relay the one where you run 200 miles or something as a team and you kind of pass off? That's Ragnar Relays?
Yes, I think it's essentially like within a 24-hour time period, probably going to have 3 runs that are anywhere from 5 to maybe 10, 12 miles.
Okay. And you said it was, what's the training for that?
Yeah, how would you approach training for an event like that? Because it's not, it's interesting because you're not necessarily running as fast as you could. A lot of folks, do try to compete by time, but a lot of folks just want to do it because it's fun. They get to hang out with their running friends for a day. They just want to make sure that they can run, maybe 20 miles in a 24-hour time period in 3 different runs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, I think one key is going to be maybe getting used to running 2 a days, maybe splitting some of your runs up, over the course of the few months beforehand, breaking it down into 2 runs that you do, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. That's a good way of practicing essentially what you're going to be doing. And then maybe you could do the same thing on a Sunday, maybe taking your Saturday and Sunday runs and turning them into 4 runs rather than 2. I think that's probably going to be something important. I would maybe keep your workouts the same as you were going to, maybe the ones you do midweek, doing them the same, and maybe even keeping the long run the same, just because that's still going to build your endurance and going to build your, fitness essentially. And those are still going to be important things if you do want to run your best for these relays. But I would maybe consider kind of breaking up some of the easier runs into 2 shorter runs, see what happens. But I don't know. I've never even thought about this. So this is one that, not knowing beforehand, I'm kind of like, I'm sure I'll have a different answer in a few hours, but for now, that's probably what I would consider my best suggestion. But what do you think?
Well, I think it's definitely important to get used to the 2 a days because, you are going to be running basically 3 times in a 24-hour time period. And that is a little bit more jarring to the body. If you've never run twice in a day, you have to get used to the feeling of, not having a night of sleep in between your runs, because that's a significant obstacle in your way of feeling good. The way I think about this is for the runner who just wants to complete the mileage, they just want to have fun with their friends. I look at the total amount of mileage that they're going to be running during the Ragnar. So, maybe it's 10 or 12 miles total. A lot of the runs might be 3 to 7 miles. You start adding them up and they're, in the kind of lower range. Mm-hmm. In that case, I would say train like you would for a half marathon. If you can get your long run up to somewhere around 10 to 13 miles at a minimum, then you're going to be someone who can adequately prepare and train and complete a Ragnar Relay. If you're someone who's going to be running the longer legs, so let's say maybe you're running 17, 20 miles total over those 3 runs, then, I would maybe train like you're training to complete a 20-mile run. Because I think, or a 20-mile race rather. So, definitely get your long runs up to, 20, maybe 21 miles, just so that, you're really comfortable with the total distance, and working on breaking that up into several runs a couple times during the training cycle so that, you are physically prepared for it, but also, just mentally are ready for what that is going to feel like is important. And then I think for, those runners who just want to hammer every single one of those legs that they're going to run, that's when we start getting into super complex, kind of more advanced training. I'd still kind of look at the total mileage and maybe train this person like a half marathoner or a marathoner somewhere, along those lines, just adding in some of those 2 a days and workouts that are geared toward the distance of the legs that they're going to run. And I think that'll give those athletes a good chance of having a really great performance at the Ragnar. But, it's certainly, these things are not normal races. I don't think there are established ways to train for it, nor do I think there is kind of like a right way to train for it. You could do it so many different ways.
Yeah.
We're gonna get a little philosophical here, Tina. I hope you're ready.
My mum brain is in effect. I don't know if I'll have the brain power, but we'll see.
Well, my father of 3 brain is turned off. So
okay, you win. All right. I'm just kidding.
All right. How do you estimate what a runner's potential is? This is a question I always struggle with because, an athlete will ask me, I just started running. What do you think I can do in the 5K 6 months from now? Or what can I do in the marathon 3 months from now? And I very frequently find myself saying, I have no idea. So, Tina, how do you think about this one?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because there's so many people that I know who have maybe started running and their first marathon was, 4 hours and now they're running, 2:40. So, when they did that 4 hours, if you'd have asked what their potential was, you would have been like, oh, maybe one day you can run 3.5 or something. But no, like they could have gone far beyond that. So it's very difficult without some kind of experience. And I would say runners need at least a year under their belt of training before you can even think about answering that question. But I am very much against kind of setting big time goals, again, especially within a time frame. So I would kind of say to as much as this is not the answer that they want to hear, to just focus on doing your best for every race, crossing that finish line with a smile on your face, thinking I could not have given any more. I'm proud of myself. Do the vision work beforehand, envisioning yourself crossing the finish with a smile and then doing it. I gave my best. I had nothing left to give. Other than obviously we are runners and we're always going to have that what if, but deep down, you gave your best. And, allow yourself to have that first year or that year from when you decide to take training seriously to really see what you're made of. And then I would say, a lot of it comes down to gut feeling as well. After that year, maybe look at a time and let's say you've run, 23 minutes in the 5K. 20 minutes may seem absolutely impossible. Or if you're a 4-hour marathoner, maybe breaking 3:30 might seem absolutely impossible. But I don't think there's anything wrong with setting a lofty goal, something that is absolutely terrifying that you think you're never going to do. I mean, my goal of running for Great Britain took me 14 years to get there, but I did it and I knew I was going to do it. So I would maybe pick something that isn't so number based and instead make it something that like a Boston qualifier is a good one because you could say I want a Boston qualifier and yes, okay, maybe you'd like to do it in the the main age group, but maybe you end up doing it when you're 67 years old. So you can there's different ways that it can kind of come out essentially. Like for me, that Great Britain jersey could have been when I was a Masters triathlete or something. So kind of maybe pick something that can be adapted and isn't so set in numbers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. Definitely a different answer than I'm going to give. And that's why I love having a co-host with these so runners can get varying perspectives on these things. So my answer is that I think it's really difficult to tell, especially if that person has only been running for a couple years. And my suggestion is to always focus on the process of training. Let's just do the best training that you can do based on your current fitness level. Then you run a race and you see where you're at. And then the goal becomes, okay, I want to improve.
That's good advice.
It's just improve. It's just, I want to get better at the time that I ran in that race or the place that I ran. And all the sub goals behind that are really training based. It's process based. I'm going to get better at the things that are going to help me get better. So I'm going to gradually increase my mileage. I'm going to do more strategic workouts. I'm going to be more consistent. I'm going to really focus on injury prevention so that I don't have to miss all this time with injuries. I'm going to incorporate strength training into my training. There's so many different things that we can do in our training to help us reach higher levels of performance. And it's difficult to know what your potential might be, what your max performance might be when you're a beginner. So I think for those runners who are beginner, intermediate, who haven't really reached what quote high levels of performance, focus on the process, focus on the training. And then when you race, when you start getting that concrete feedback about your fitness level, you can use that to then make some more concrete race goals, because that's really kind of how you do it. You look at your racing performances and you go, okay, well, I want to get better on that, and you use equivalent performances across different race distances to estimate what you think you could do in other races. But at the end of the day, you're just training as hard as you can, focusing on the process, doing the little things, and just trying to get better at getting better.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good advice.
Okay. Here's one that I don't really know much about, so I'm glad I have you here, Tina. What do you do when you're out there and you get a muscle cramp?
When you're in the moment where it happens.
Let's just say you're out there, you're on a long run or just out run around the neighborhood, and your muscle cramps up. Say it's your calf muscle. What do you do? Because this is something that it doesn't really happen to me personally, and I'm not too well read up on the topic.
No, and I would say same thing. I haven't had a muscle cramp in, I don't know if the last time I remember having, I did have it once when I was pregnant. I do remember that. But other than that, I think I've had it once in my life in a swimming pool, and that's all I remember. But I know the key thing you need to do is stop and elongate that muscle. So if it's, your calf muscle has cramped so that it's kind of pulling up, which it probably is, then the best thing you can do is to stretch that muscle to get it to kind of let go and relax, essentially. Now, on that note, actually, I remember now, you've just reminded me of this, when it did happen when I was pregnant, it was in the middle of the night, and I started screaming to my husband. I said, I got a cramp, what do I do? And he said, pull your toes up. And I did. And I was like, it's not working. And then so he was like, point your toes. And so we were kind of having an argument while I was like screaming at him in the night. Off topic. But so I might have that the wrong way around. But I know it hurts. So that was my point of that. But yeah, I know you stop and stretch it. But as for other things to do in the moment, I guess you can stop and massage it wherever you feel that knot. I found it helpful when this happened to me to just jam my finger in there and kind of hold it essentially until it let go. But I think getting it to stretch is going to be the quickest way. Now, it's probably going to be a little bit sore afterwards. So, maybe either walk for a few minutes or slow down your pace. If you're doing a workout, I would maybe consider backing out, because that calf is going to be essentially, hurt a little bit from it grabbing like that. So you might need to take, the rest of the day off or even a few days off. So don't be afraid of that. But if that is the case, I do know often with cramps, people think it's, electrolytes or not having enough salts, which maybe that is the case. In which case, there are plenty of drinks. I personally love Enduro packs. They have a liquid electrolyte spray. So I use that to prevent cramps. But a lot of the time, cramps are not actually to do with fueling related. They're actually to do with you're pushing your body further than it is ready to go, which is why people often get it, around miles 20 to 23 of a marathon, because they've pushed their body at a pace that it's not quite ready for. So I would go back and look back on your training, look back at what you've been doing, and consider where you can make a change so that it doesn't happen again. So I'm sure you have more advice for this that's going to actually be helpful. Mine's kind of more of a personal experience. I
don't think that I do. And I think that does speak to the difficulty of this question, is just because muscle cramps, are kind of a tricky thing to treat in the moment. If you are out on a run and you get a muscle cramp, you might just be done running for the day and potentially a few days more, simply because when your muscle involuntarily contracts like that during a cramp, it contracts way harder than you can actually contract it yourself. And so, there is some damage to the muscle, and you might need some recovery afterward. I completely agree with you that, electrolytes typically aren't the cause of most muscle cramps in a race situation. And, you used the marathon example, which I think is a great one because it's so common. If runners are cramping in the later stages of a marathon, it's probably because they made an error or a mistake with their marathon preparation or racing. It's number one, they're not prepared for the distance. So let's say they only got up to 17 miles for their long run. This is their first marathon and they're cramping at mile 20 or 21 of the race. Well, you're just not prepared to run the distance. The other reason could be if you're trained for the marathon and you can probably run around 3:30, but your first 5 miles were at 3-hour flat pace. Well, if you get a cramp later in the race, it's probably because you went out too fast and you're asking too much of your body. So, I think it's much more productive to look at the reasons why cramps happen, which is essentially asking your body to do too much before it's ready for it, and trying to limit or reduce your exposure to those risky situations where you could get a cramp in the first place. Okay. Let's do one more question before we wrap up here. This is going to be a good one about pacing. How do you determine pacing for the long run? And kind of a sub question to that is, does it depend on your goal race? So here, let me start, Tina. I think the long run is something I think about a lot just because I think it's such a valuable workout, like we were talking about earlier, for, runners training for, any distance. If you're training for the mile or an ultra, long run is such a critical workout for you to do during the week. So pacing for the long run, I typically look at long runs as glorified easy runs. They're not recovery runs. They're not going to be a 3, 4, 5 mile super easy run the day after a hard workout, but they're also not structured faster workouts. You're not going to be running your long runs at a tempo effort, for example. But with that said, it's also not going to be at a recovery pace. So the pace is kind of this easy, but not necessarily as slow as you can go type of a pace. I think for beginners, a lot of them are running their long runs as the slowest run of the week, and I think that's fine. But I think once you develop a little bit more capability, you have to recognize that the long run is not a recovery run. Therefore, I don't think it should be the slowest run of the week. You're going to get a little bit more aerobic bang for your buck if you run it, at a normal easy pace rather than a very, very easy recovery pace. And I think that is just speaking to kind of a standard, typical long run. For more advanced runners, you're going to start putting some quality into your long runs. You're going to start, adding goal marathon paced miles or fartleks or, any other of almost unlimited variations of workouts that you could add into those long runs based on whatever goal race that you're training for. But essentially, I look at them as just another easy run. It's just a lot longer.
So as most people who know me, and I think you probably know this by now, just knowing me, I am a big proponent of not looking at your watch, not knowing your paces during any of your runs really, but particularly those long runs and easy runs. I'm definitely a fan of not looking at your watch, or no watch me as I call it, which is saying not necessarily don't wear a GPS, but don't look at it because you can freak yourself out. And I particularly found this to be the case with long runs, because let's say you were, doing your long run and you were feeling good and you thought, I actually feel quite good today. And you're running along, you're feeling very comfortable, you're feeling strong. And then you look down at your watch and you see it's way faster than your race pace. And then you think, I'm going to blow up. I'm not going to make it through this run. How am I going to make it the last few miles? I'm so tired. This is so hard. And you psych yourself out. Now, I've done that myself. I distinctly can see in my mind's eye a time where I was thinking that. Or you can do it the other way. Maybe you look down at your watch, or you feel like you're really struggling today. You feel like you must be going really fast. And, if you're not, then you're in trouble. How are you ever going to make it through your race if you can't make it through this long run? And then you look down and it's slower than you think. And you think, I better pick it up because I need to be able to run faster than this for race day. I need to, get myself ready. And you pick it up and you push your body when it's not ready, and it feels worse. And you end up feeling worse. You feel terrible about yourself. So I personally believe that everyone has the ability to learn how to pace themselves in long run and to know what that natural pace is of what they should be running. but you just have to practice it. And if you think about it, even 20 years ago, we didn't have GPS watches. People just went out and ran. I mean, we've added so much complicating and overthinking to our long runs. Now, that's not to say that I don't think there should be some quality in those long runs, as you mentioned, and there's many ways you can do it. The progressive one where you pick it up each time, you pick it up as you go along. There's the one you mentioned with doing fartleks or little pickup bits in the middle. But again, I believe all of this should be effort. I talk a lot about what I call the effort scale, so on a number from 1 to 10. So, to kind of differentiate between how hard you should be going. But even if you were going to do it getting faster with every mile, it shouldn't be, I'm going to run this pace for the next mile and this pace for the next mile. It should be just slowly, like imagining yourself kind of like being on a spin bike, that they tell you to do 1.5 rotations or whatever. And it always feels so much harder not doing it that way, but kind of just imagine yourself slowly turning the dial over the course of the long run so that it is getting harder, but it's not really that noticeable. And it's just kind of building on at a rate that you can mentally and physically keep on top of it. So I would say that running without your watch is often, or not looking at your watch. You can look at it afterwards. You can go nuts on the Strava data afterwards if you want to. But I would suggest people get used to learning and listening to their own body's signals in training, and especially in long runs. That's a good time to practice it first. And if you do make some mistakes, well, you've learned it now, so you don't need to make it in the race. So you can learn how that feels to be going the right pace and how it feels to be going too fast. So that's pretty much what I would say.
Yeah, I like that, and especially because, you're basically replacing the word pace with effort. You're telling runners to run at what I'm intuiting is an easy effort, but that is very subjective. And I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of runners want to move away from any kind of subjectivity. They don't want their coach to say, run 4 miles at an easy effort. They want to say, run 4 miles at 8:30 mile pace. Yeah. And that's often really hard because the actual pace is influenced by whether or not you've had a cup of coffee and the weather, the humidity, how you're feeling, how well recovered you are. And, the purpose is not to run 8:30 pace. The purpose is to run an easy effort. And if we can embrace a little bit more of that subjectivity, give up a little bit more control when we're out there running, I think we're going to enjoy our runs more. And we're just going to get a more intuitive feeling for our pacing and what certain paces feel like, so that, we can get in a race situation. And, a race situation, of course, is an incredibly subjective experience. You don't know what the weather is going to be like on race day. You don't know what your competition is going to do. You don't know if they're going to change the course beforehand. So by embracing more of that subjectivity, we can, I think, better prepare ourselves for race day. So this is our really long-winded way of saying there's no perfect way of determining pace for your long run. It should be mostly an easy effort, I think.
Yep, I agree.
Wonderful. Well, Tina, there we go. Thanks so much for lending some of your expertise, your perspectives on the podcast. I love having other podcasters on just because you're just so good at what you do. Definitely encourage our listeners to check out Running for Real, your podcast. Really great. And, this is, I think, an interesting way for runners to be exposed to a lot of different questions that they might not have thought about asking themselves, but, might relate to their running or just further educate them. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Good idea.
And there we have it. I hope this episode of Question and Answers with us two running coaches was helpful and possibly even entertaining. Might be asking too much with that, though. Okay, before you go, a big thanks to Root Pepper for making this show possible. If you travel a lot or you run in a lot of new places, you know how hard it can be sometimes to find a good route and then not get lost out there when you're running. It happened to me constantly when I was in Australia a few years ago, and I would have really liked this when I was lost in the bush in 39 degrees Celsius weather. That certainly wasn't any fun. But that's where Root Pepper comes in. It lets you create road or off-road running routes directly in the app or from your desktop computer. And then those directions for those routes are spoken to you directly through your earphones, so you're not going to get lost. It works anywhere in the world, it's free, and it doesn't use any of your mobile data. It's available now in the App Store, or you can go to rootpepper.com to learn more about it. Oh, and if you have a smartwatch that supports notifications, it will integrate with that too. So head on over to rootpepper.com to check it out. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being a part of the strength running community. And please don't be a stranger. If you have a question or a concern, you can always reach out to me personally through the strengthrunning.com website. Until next time.